Joseph Duarte, Houston Chronicle, joins us, 365 Sports with Paul and Craig, and I'm David Smoak. Joseph, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. We're kind of taking a tour. We have talked to you many times back when there were thoughts that Houston could join, when that, of course, became reality and whatever else, and here we're on the verge. In your opinion, what is it about Houston at this particular time that makes them most prepared for what they're about to be a part of in the Big 12, and what are a couple of things in which they have to be careful about?
Well, if you waited close to 30 years for something, I would hope that you're pretty prepared, or at least have set things up where you can go in and, it's been a long time. I mean, let's just get that out of the way. They've waited, and, a lot of people didn't think that it would come, and if it did, it would take several more years. They thought about it in 2016 when the Big 12, had its process that they didn't end up doing anything. But to answer your question, they just from the standpoint of they've sort of operated like a Power Five for the better part of the last decade without the conference affiliation. The coaching salaries, they've tried to gone out and got some attractive coaches. They've invested in the facilities. But with that said, what they really need to sort of up the ante is the same facilities. Dana Holgerson's gone on record saying that he's been in the Big 12 at West Virginia. He's been around at Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, and they're going to be near the bottom in that same facilities race. So I mean, they're trying to raise money for about $140 million football operations building that should break ground at the end of this year. So for the $500 million or so that they pumped into the program that have gone directly to those facilities, that just shows you that helped them get into the game. Now they've sort of got to ratchet up another level to sort of keep up with the ever-changing facilities and how that arms race seems to be a every couple of years deal.
Joseph, the really bummer transfer of Alton McCaskill notwithstanding, how do you feel they are roster wise set up to start in September?
Well, they've got some holes, and that's number one, because you go into a spring and frankly you come out of it thinking that that's one problem or that you don't have. And for that to happen, the way it was a Friday, they say goodbye, have a good weekend, and on Monday, Alton McCaskill comes in and says, "Hey, I'm transferring." So that was a big blow. They got their quarterback in December from Texas Tech, Donovan Smith, and then with the transfer portal, they lost a lot of offensive linemen. I would say that the two biggest issues that they have right now is who's going to be sort of the guy in the backfield. And they've got some guys to replace on the offensive line. They lost an all-conference left guard and Cameron Johnson, and a couple of other key backups. They lost their right tackle. So that's where they kind of came out of the spring. No injuries, but the way the transfer portal works these days, those feel like you lose somebody to a season ender, because look at the numbers that have entered the portal throughout the spring and are finding new homes.
Joseph, I think I'd ask you about Alton McCaskill like maybe every other time or nearly every time that you were on, because I loved watching him play a couple years ago. I know you just kind of touched on it, but I felt like Dana Holgerson handled that about as well as anybody possibly could have, because I can only imagine that he was, red-faced and not happy behind the scenes, but I thought he really handled that well.
Yeah, and I agree. And talking with Dana the day that it happened, you sort of get a feel for when a coach knows something's happening and when he was completely blindsided. And I really believe it was the latter for Dana Holgerson. They didn't see this coming. There had been some whispers, and I think The Athletic had a story recently about some Group of Five schools that just feel like they got to hold their breath with the transfer portal, because there's that word nobody wants to say. The poaching and the maybe the back channeling that goes on in college football, where there's now third parties that get involved, maybe plant a seed with the kid and say, "Hey, look, NIL are those three letters now that can either make you or break you." And in this case, Houston's done well in the NIL space, but they're not where some schools are that are frankly for position groups, whether you're offensive lineman or team wide deals where you're getting X amount of money. They just couldn't match that if that ended up being the 100% the case. But yeah, Alton McCaskill is a special talent. He was coming off the injury. All indications were that he was back from the ACL. And that was a guy going into the Big 12. You can't say he left because you're not in a good conference and he's not going to get exposure and the draft, the scouts aren't going to be looking at him. He had all of that. So what did it come down to? And unfortunately, in Alton McCaskill's case, he's not taking any questions and he's not making those answers available. So you've got to, assume that NIL played a role in his recruitment elsewhere. And we don't even know yet where he's going, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up at Colorado. That was the first school that was linked to him when he entered the portal. So we'll see how this plays out. But it was certainly a huge surprise for everyone here in Houston when he decided to leave.
Joseph, you brought up the facilities. Dana Holgerson has brought that up. We had Chris Presman on, the AD. He's brought that up. Well, everyone knows, and they hear the name Tillman Fertitta, who has a massive amount of money, and every school has one, and some schools have like 9 of him. Where else and what else, or who are the other big name donors that Houston can lean on or does lean on?
Oh, those Tillmans don't grow on trees, and I'm sure right now Tillman is somewhere praying for Victor, as he put it, Wimbayama, in the NBA lottery. So there's a lot of other things that occupy his time, but no, in seriousness, I mean, he's their guy. You think of the other schools, whether it's Baylor and Drayton, or Texas has. They've had Red McCombs and some other guys that have stepped up. Houston's got Tillman, and really, I guess you look at it, there's a huge gap between your one and your number 2 donor. And it's interesting because a lot of their stuff comes in anonymously, so they don't have a this list that we have that's public that just says, okay, these are mega donors. Back in the day, John Moore, who owned the San Diego Padres, among other things, he was their Tillman before Tillman was on the scene. So what they've done, and they announced this week, they're cultivating that smaller and your definition of smaller in terms of the economics is probably different than mine, but they want to go after just bigger numbers in terms of quantity of people that want to give, so that they don't rely. And we're not talking 6-figure gifts for everyone, but they just want to feel like they can add it up to make a dent, because they've had a lot of the people, to answer your question, that are donating besides Tillman, they're corporations. They're places here in town that they have established relationships with, whether it's the TDECU, which has the naming rights for the football stadium, or someone like a Memorial Hermann, who is in healthcare. So they sort of do it that way. But in my 12 years covering this team, they have a guy or two here and there that'll give $1 million every once in a while, but there's not a move the needle guy quite like Tillman, and a lot of schools don't have that. It's just the way money goes these days. You just don't have somebody that can just carry an athletic program. You got to have multiple guys like that.
Is Donovan Smith, without question, the starting at quarterback when the season begins in September?
I would have to say absolutely. Just the fact that it was him and Lucas Coley in the spring, and Coley's a transfer from Arkansas, played a few snaps last year, but he doesn't have that experience. And that's why Houston had to go out and get a veteran quarterback. And they get one that they're familiar with. Donovan Smith was the guy who led that big comeback for Texas Tech in the double overtime win against Houston in week 2 last year. And he's got about 31 games under his belt. They feel like he fits into the offense, what they want to do. So, yeah, he's the guy. I don't think it's a situation where between now and August, they bring in another quarterback that will compete for the job. I think Dana wants to add one more just as a security blanket because they have those two. Then they're bringing in an incoming freshman, but they don't have anyone else after that. So if something happens, you're one injury away from a bunch of quarterbacks right now that have never played a meaningful snap in college football, or at least one in a major conference.
Joseph, how do they go about trying to replace the numbers that Tank Dell put up these last couple of years, especially last year? There's a ridiculous number of touchdowns and over 100 receptions. And on top of that, just how cool is that to see his moment there during the draft, staying close to his new home here in Houston?
Well, first of all, the Texas Medical Center is about 4 miles from the campus. They should have gone into cloning about 3 years ago and invested some money there to see if they could find a way to duplicate this guy. I mean, it's been the Tank Dell show for the last 2+ years, and you don't replace a guy like that. I mean, this guy, for all of the stories about how he didn't have many offers out of high school and had to go the JUCO route for a year. I mean, it was a phenomenal story. And I went back and crunched the numbers, and he had close to like 300 targets the last 2 years, and no one came even a third of that from what he got. So that just shows you the load that he carried, and it's truly going to be one of those by committee approaches. They have Matthew Golden, who they feel is their next star. They went out of the transfer portal and got a couple of guys. And then returning wise, they have Joseph Manjack and Sam Brown. But, I mean, none of those guys, came anywhere close to putting up Tank Dell numbers. So that's going to be something that is going to have to evolve, because not only are you going to have a different running back, you lose your quarterback and you lose your top receiver. So those are three huge pieces that are going to be gone from the last 2 years for Houston. And as far as his moment, the fact that he doesn't have to go very far, I mean, those are always cool stories. And the Texans saw value to take him when they took him in the third round. And I was watching some video of his rookie mini camp today, and I mean, he's just we've seen the route running and the quick moves, and it's going to be fun to see where his career takes off the first couple of years, or even the first couple of games, because I think this is a guy that, much like Marcus Jones, who played on the defensive side, he can go in and make a big impact for a team like the Texans right off the bat.
Joseph, great stuff as always, man. Glad we got a hold of you today. Thanks for being a part of this kind of the preview of these schools, even though we've talked to you many times. Thanks for your insight.
Looking forward to seeing you guys on a regular basis. I always enjoy my time in Waco, and let's get this thing rolling with media days in mid-July. So we'll see you there.
And also appreciated your tweet, putting out our names of people to follow if they want a coverage on Baylor, all the 365 Sports staff. Joseph Duarte, Houston Chronicle, with us on 365 Sports.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for them. They definitely have